Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us here on Let's Talk Careers with PATH. My name is Catherine Johnston, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for PATH, PATH Employment Services. I'm here today to talk with our guest, Cam Galindo, about his occupation and his journey through to the occupation that he's presently in. What the information that we're sharing here is for those who might be thinking about getting into a certain career or starting a new career, changing a career, just to find out a personal journey, I guess, for someone who's in that kind of role. So Cam's going to share with us his journey, and yeah, so thanks, Cam, for joining us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Catherine. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for putting this together. I appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. So let's start with what do you do for a living? What's your occupation?
That's a very good question. I wear many hats, and maybe it speaks to what's becoming a lot more common for people of my generation, and really everyone that works in any generation, which is the level of precarious employment is becoming a norm, and it's continually increasing. So precarious employment is the type of work that isn't as permanent as it could be. So for example, a lot of people who are just entering the workforce or are recent grads of college or university, for them it's really hard to find a permanent position in any sector. And that's what precarious employment is, because you may start off with a 1 to 2 year contract, but you don't know where you're going to be in 3 to 5 years. And from a business side of things, I mean, it's easier for corporations, for government agencies to say, you know what, let's not commit to giving someone a full-time job. Let's wait until they prove themselves, then open that up. But there's certainly a business case now for them to just not offer permanent employment, even at that point, and it's becoming a lot more rare. I know people who have been working in the public sector for 10 to 15 years and are still on contract, still unable to find permanent employment. So with that said, I that's where I find myself. I'm constantly torn between having to wear multiple hats because of different passions, different employment needs, and different, I guess, priorities in life, while also recognizing that it's pretty hard to find a permanent job, even if you are looking for a permanent job. I'm from Hamilton. I did my undergraduate degree at McMaster University, where I did an honors degree in political science with a minor in economics. And I'm currently doing a master's degree at UFT, a master's in public policy. So I'm 26 years old now, and up to this point, I've either been in school, I've been working, or doing something in political life, or a combination of those, where I'm constantly wearing multiple hats. So today, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm in school. I hold elected office as a public school board trustee for Stony Creek, and then I'm also working, where I've had the odd jobs here and there, where I was the community lead for Ample Labs in Hamilton. For they were rolling out a new product called Chalmers, and they were introducing it to Hamilton. So that was some work that I did on the side. And then there's also work that I do in the not-for-profit sector, and most of that is volunteer work. That's how most of my work in the community started, was volunteer work. And on one hand, I am privileged enough to be able to volunteer, because not everyone can volunteer. Because of the opportunities I had to volunteer, that opened up other opportunities and other doors down the road. So what started off as volunteering at St. Joseph's in the Urgent Care Center, branched off to volunteer work on multiple municipal advisory committees at United Way. I did some work with Hamilton Public Health Services. That introduced me to advocacy work in the community. So it's always, like I said, it's either been school, volunteer work, actual work, or somehow fitting in all these passions that I have. And I still haven't even answered your question, Catherine. So let me restate this. I did my schooling at McMaster while doing volunteer work. When I finished my schooling at McMaster, I ran for office. I ran for public school board trustee. That was my focus right out of university in 2017. So I got elected in 2018. The challenge with being a public school board trustee is that it doesn't pay very well. And it's meant to be a part-time job, but really it can be full-time hours sometimes.
Mhm.
But I still needed to survive financially. So after I got elected, I joined the Canada Revenue Agency at 55 Bay Street and worked there for about a year and a half before going back to school to do a master's degree. Um, while doing my master's, I also did work with Ample Labs as the community lead. I mentioned that earlier. Um, so those would be the big jobs that I've had historically as school board trustee, work with the tech non-for-profit sector, which is Ample Labs, and working at the Canada Revenue Agency, in addition to some of the volunteer work that I've done here, just on the side. But that's a summary, or at least an attempt at a summary of where we're at now.
Sounds like a whole life already that you've lived in 26 years.
It keeps me busy. It keeps me busy, but it definitely does. It's given me the benefit of perspective, put it that way, and an understanding of how the real world works. And at the end of the day, it falls down to what you want to do and what your passions are, and trying to make it work. So I'm hoping that I've set myself up to successfully navigate the system, I guess, is the takeaway.
Do you have a vision of where you want to be? Like, do you have an end goal in mind, continuing with your education?
I think so. I think, the program that I'm doing at UFT is very much focused on streamlining graduates into the public service, whether it be working for the Ontario Public Service or the federal government. With that, there's also jobs in the private sector or not-for-profit. I think that's my backup plan, because politics, my passion is politics, and I think there's a lot of work that can and could be done there. Politically, that could either be done through advocacy or it could be done by holding elected office. That being said, there isn't a thing as a career in politics anymore. It used to be that you could get elected and you would serve public office in some capacity for a long time. It's changed, and it's probably a good thing that it's changed. So politics, I see politics as a stopover at this point. You win some elections, you lose some elections. What you do in the meantime or in between those is what I'm trying to set myself up for by doing this master's degree in public policy, because that might open opportunities to actually work in the public service, like at the CRA, or doing something else that I'm passionate about, or even doing some consulting, something like that. So my answer to your question is, if it's not holding elected office, it's either working in consulting or for a public service organization somewhere.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So do you think that most of the tools that you've learned from school are mostly from your experience in the community with your volunteering and the organizations that you were part of?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there's often been this historic disconnect between what the real world is actually like versus what you're taught in school. And we find this anywhere, right? When I look back to my grade school years, high school, elementary school, very little of what I learned is actually applicable to the real world, or could have been learned elsewhere by simply watching the news or something.
Yeah.
Our school system has a tendency to prioritize certain parts of academia that aren't as applicable to real world scenarios. So, for example, we're not teaching kids how to file taxes or how to do their taxes.
Oh,
but
exactly.
kids, like, thank God they remember the Pythagorean theorem. It's little stuff like that. So there's this continual push to modernize our education system so that it's more so that it sets people up more for what the future holds. We see that with the sciences, for example. So when how do we make sure that when kids finish school and they go to post-secondary, or if they go to post-secondary, they have the skills needed to succeed in post-secondary? And then with that, how do we make sure that when they graduate post-secondary, they actually have the relevant skills to then go into whatever field they want to go into? And it's something that it really needs to be like trickle down skill learning, where Employers and industry need to tell us what the kids need to know. So it's this constant kind of back and forth there. So my answer to your question is it can be challenging because doing schooling isn't a guarantee of being successful in the field because you typically need experience for that. I've learned in my experience that experience, actually working or volunteering, having that experience is either a supplement to what you've learned at school or is an education onto itself.
Yeah.
I think, and actually I'll do a perfect example of that. So I sit on policy committee at the school board. Obviously, as a trustee, we do a lot of policy work. I've done policy work in the past with municipal advisory committees and other boards and such things. So I have a lot of hands-on policy experience. Now that I'm doing a master in public policy, it's like we're learning things that I already knew. The difference being now I'm formalizing education because having a piece of paper can take you a long way. A piece of paper that says schooling, right?
Yeah.
So except for the math stuff, because I've always been terrible at math. I'm finding the program to be kind of nice, to be able to, I find myself in a position where I can contribute to discussions a lot easier because I have that firsthand, hands-on experience in the field. So I think it's, they complement each other. It's a bit of both. But it can be challenging to navigate that, especially if someone's entering the workforce. My parents, we came to Canada as refugees when I was 7 years old, and like many immigrant families, my parents struggled to not only adapt to a new language and new culture, but they struggled to find steady employment opportunities in Hamilton because they were living the immigrant experience. It wasn't just the language barrier. It was also the fact that suddenly whatever education they had in Colombia didn't transfer over to Canada in the sense that, a college diploma here looks the same way as Colombia. It doesn't, right? So it creates these barriers because what do you do then? You enter the workforce with limited education and you do whatever you can, which typically tends to be labor or customer service, or you somehow find enough money to go back to school to formalize what you already knew.
What you already know, yeah.
Just so that people can recognize it in the workplace.
Or prove that you know what you've,
Exactly. And, we see that with every field. We have that, a lot of like how not that I ride taxis all the time, but how many times have I found myself in a taxi where the taxi driver was a doctor in the country or like a nurse practitioner, and simply because they didn't have the funding to meet the requirements to practice in Canada. Now they're driving a taxi. I mean, they're fine with it, but that's just an example of some of the challenges that people face when they enter the workforce. For native-born Canadians, or people who speak English or who came from other first world countries, it is a lot easier, yes, but again, it depends on what you want to do and whether or not education is needed for what you want to do. Catherine, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. You've probably seen, the stereotype that, 30, 40 years ago, to get a good job, a good permanent job, all you needed was like a high school diploma. You graduated high school, you found a job at Stelco, and then you bought a house within the first 2 years. That times have since changed, and then it became, well, now you need a college degree or diploma to find a good job. Now it's now they're saying that you need an undergrad degree from university, and now they're increasing it. Now they're saying you need a master's degree to do. So we have this workforce that is completely overqualified to do the jobs that they're doing, which is taking jobs away from people who don't need that education, but can't get those jobs because there's a lot of overqualified people. And oh my gosh, now I'm getting too political here, maybe political. But, yeah, I think our workforce certainly has its challenges, and I think like I said, it all depends on what you want to do. I guess that's what it comes down to. Yeah, that was a long rant. Oh my goodness, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm running out of water already.
So what made you decide, what was it that piqued your interest to get into like the politics? Was it something that happened when you were younger? Was it?
Yeah, I mean, I think politics isn't for everyone, and it's for me, it feels like a vocational calling to,
Mhm.
cite my Catholic school upbringing. Uh, I have a lot of lived experience in areas of life where people typically struggle. And I was raised as an at-risk youth, not just because I was a newcomer youth. English wasn't my first language.
Mhm.
As a visible minority, there was just so many other reasons that I was considered an at-risk youth, if not for the fact that I was being raised by a single mother of two in a low-income household, struggling with mental health and my sexual orientation, and there was just so much kind of stacked against me growing up, and it gave me a very different perspective because where others might have gone down the wrong route, I used those experiences to kind of motivate me uh,
Mhm.
to do better. And because there's always been people that are like, you're going to fail, you're destined to be one of those at-risk youth that goes to jail, that gets involved with criminal activity,
Mhm.
drug addiction. The idea that somehow I was destined not to be successful in life or whatever I did, and that to me was motivation for, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. And while I'm at it, I found passions for community organizing, advocacy, health promotion, and because of those volunteer opportunities, I realized that politics was the place where I needed to be. The question then became where politically, right? Because you could,
Mhm. Yep.
there's different ways of being involved, and not everyone has to be the candidate. But for me, it was this. I just couldn't wrap my head around I'm doing all this work to kind of promote certain policies or programs within government, and yet the people that are making decisions on those policies are often the most underqualified and inexperienced people to make those decisions, and then they have an impact on the entire system that
Mhm.
isn't reflective of what the system actually needs. So it was those type of realities that made me realize that I can't just be stuck constantly sending emails to politicians saying I need you to do this. Rather, it's better to just take the calling and do whatever I can to improve the system in whatever capacity through elected office. So that's kind of what motivated me to get involved politically. And I think I think we're fortunate to live in a country where a lot of the challenges that we face here are nothing compared to the challenges that I might have faced growing up in Colombia, for example.
Mhm.
So I'm constantly fortunate and mindful of that, but at the same time, the challenges that we do have are still challenges, and a lot of
Yeah.
people, you know, need those problems to be fixed. Um, so, and every so often, I'm reminded of why I ran in the first place. Whenever there is a small victory at the school board, or I feel like
Mhm.
we've done something substantial, um, I shed a little tear every now and then because you see the impact that it has on people,
Yeah.
and it's emotional. So that's my political story, and why I decided to go into that realm. But like I said, politics is a stopover. It's not a career.
Mhm.
So, how do I now take the skills and passions that I have politically and apply them to another job? My case is unique because the stereotype is you graduate high school, you go to post-secondary, you finish post-secondary, you find a job,
Mhm.
get married, have kids.
Mhm.
That's not, obviously that's not the path that I've chosen for myself, at least, or was destined for. Um, but of the people who I do know who are following that path, or some degree of it, it's, you know, finding employment has never been more difficult. Actually, is that true? Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's certainly different than what it was 30, 40 years ago. It might have been easier 6, 7 years ago, but um, with the introduction of new technologies and new systems and the lack of permanent, well-paying jobs is a challenge. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of intersectionality here. I do want to quickly just talk about one of the biggest changes we're seeing right now in the workforce is working from home.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah.
that was something that has gained popularity in the last 2 decades, and was becoming more, it was becoming more popular, especially in the public service, private sector as well. People were realizing the benefit and economic value of having their employees work from home, not all the time, but occasionally, from like a mental health perspective, a cost saving perspective. What COVID-19 and what this pandemic has done for us is I think it sped up that process. So where we would have been from a working from home scenario maybe in 30 years, we're in that. It sped it up faster than you could have imagined. And I'll use my work at the Canada Revenue Agency as an example of that. At the Canada Revenue Agency, very few people worked from home. In my department, where we had a workforce of over like 1,000 people, only maybe like 20 were working from home. Occasionally, it also depended on what your position was, but occasionally. And like I said, it varies from department to department. Suddenly with COVID, everyone was working from home, or like 99.9% of the workforce was working from home. And the Canada Revenue Agency had the challenge of how do we now find the equipment that everyone needs? How do we meet the security requirements that everyone needs? How do we make sure that they have, their methods of communication, internet, landline? The security piece was always a big issue at the CRA, but now that's what we're doing. We'll probably find an equilibrium after the pandemic is done, where like the future of work, assuming that it's your stereotypical working behind an office desk or in front of a computer, it's going to be a combination of working from the office or working from home, if not mostly working from home and only coming into the office occasionally for team meetings or events or topics of that nature, or discussions with your boss, where it's probably not good news. Here over Zoom.
Come in to empty your desk. That there's nothing.
Yeah, that type of. Bring your laptop into work. Just
bring tools with you.
Yeah, so I think that's the future. I think obviously, like I'm big on. Again, it depends from person to person, but I'm big on the whole like the divide between my personal life and my work life. That's really important to me and to many people. Now, one of the challenges is now that you're working from home, it's a lot harder to have that divide, because you're no longer commuting to work. You're no longer, you're no longer you don't have your own space anymore. Now you're working from home in the same place that you're watching Netflix sometimes. Again, intersectionality with that is, I think the future of buying homes is making sure that there's an office space included. Right now, I think that's going to become more of a requirement. Make sure that you have your own space with a door that you can close to do work, and then at the end of the night and close it again. But again, depends on what you're doing, how passionate you are about it. I've had a lot of jobs that I don't like, and only a handful of them have I really enjoyed. And it, again, depends on the person. Some people are happy working at the Canada Revenue Agency. Others maybe don't like taxes as much. I'm definitely one of those people. So if you're from the CRA, nothing against you, but not my cup of tea. So we'll see. I think, oh gosh, there's just so many topics and so many things that we can talk about. But
I know.
But yeah, that's my spiel on that.
So what you're doing right now? What's the thing that you like the most right now that you're involved in? Since you're wearing multiple hats, you can pick anything.
The trustee life is what I'm most passionate about right now. I enjoy everything I do to a certain degree, but the trustee work is something like it's reaffirmed that this is what I want to do full time. I just need to do it full time. Hopefully be able to actually have the pay that compensates that full-time work.
Yes, of course.
Loving that, but every so often a little project comes along that I enjoy doing, like work, like the work that I do with United Way, the volunteer work there, or that little project I did with Ample Labs as the lead for Hamilton. That was one of those projects that got me excited, and I thought, yeah, this is great. Suddenly I guess I could also just work in the not-for-profit as something where there's a lot of passion. I think nowadays people put a lot of focus on how much money am I going to make, and really for me it's a balance of the two. I'd rather do something that is a lot more rewarding and a lot more enjoyable, that makes less money,
Mhm.
as opposed to having a job that I completely hate, that eats my soul, but I'm making a lot of money, right? So in a perfect world, you get paid a lot to do what you love. That's hard to
Mhm.
find sometimes, but every now and then you find like a balance between the
Yeah.
two. Right? That's certainly what I feel with the trustee life, where I love it, I enjoy it, I'm passionate about it, I feel fulfilled, but the pay is peanuts compared to
Yeah.
and this.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I think time will tell where we end up. Um,
Yeah.
but
It's still nice to be able to make some changes and be a part of the changes that are happening. So, I mean, that's gratifying in itself.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think I'm trying to think of how this might be applicable to people that are listening in, or people who use the services at Path. Um, networking historically has been a big thing that can be challenging with COVID, but the value in networking, and really networking to me is just socializing, but
Mhm.
socializing with people
Yeah.
outside of your sphere, and that could
Yeah.
be people who work at different places, different organizations, different companies, or people outside of your area of expertise altogether.
Mhm.
And that
Yeah.
was
To
the
learn,
real
right?
exactly, and that was the
We always have
real.
to keep learning. It's not even about what you're doing,
Mhm.
directly. It's about learning what's happening around you because it does help you grow in the path that you're in.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think that was the big value in the volunteer work that I did, which was,
Mhm.
I got like I volunteered at a hospital.
That's awesome.
I didn't want to become a doctor, mostly,
Yeah.
wasn't smart enough to become a doctor or had the opportunities to, but I still did it because I thought, wouldn't it be nice to learn about the public health sphere, and
Mhm.
and healthcare. So that was the value in that. But you never know where you're going to find a passion. And I think being open to those new experiences, and again, this is where that networking piece comes in, being open to talking
Mhm.
with people of different
Yep.
backgrounds. That's the real value of networking. And if it so happens to land you a job somewhere, great. Right.
Might find a
Uh,
passion in something you volunteer at and didn't really even realize that that's something that you wanted to do for, an occupation. So it comes
and,
from anywhere.
and honestly, Catherine, I think that's one of the things that I'm constantly surprised by in my life is, what may seem like a small interaction
Mhm.
could end up changing the trajectory of your life altogether, right?
Yeah,
That one person you met that one time, or that one person who agreed to grab coffee with you, could lead to the opening of so many other opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have seen had you not taken the leap
absolutely.
to
Yeah, I agree.
have that conversation.
Moments like that. I'm glad I went and did that. I'm glad I went and met them.
And it's usually like the smallest things ever, like
Yeah,
you know, like
yeah,
the slightest change in wind direction that day could have had, right?
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
weird kind of voodoo stuff like that that trips me out every now and then, but it's humbling, right? But it's again a reminder that it's so important not to isolate yourself from those experiences and those networking opportunities. But
Absolutely. Yeah, and that doesn't just come from education. I mean, that's life experience, life skills, and that's another thing that our youth need to get some life skills. It needs to be part of the curriculum and part of the path because that teaches you how to socialize, that teaches you how to be, comfortable out of your element and engage and learn and grow and yeah, do your taxes.
yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely nothing bad to be said about experience, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
not that I want to go into a whole debate around what's more important, education or experience. Like I said, they're both complementary, they're both
complimentary.
important.
Yeah,
But sometimes you just have someone with a lot more experience who knows what they're doing a lot more than someone who has an education in that area, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but again, it all depends on the field, right? I'd rather have a doctor who went to med school,
Oh,
who
yes.
has the experience, as opposed to someone who just has the experience, right?
Yes, lots of experience for the doctors.
Yeah.
Lot-
Um, Yes, just listening, I guess. Listening, enjoying your work, and just being open-minded. I think, and then another assumption that people have of millennials and maybe Gen Xers too is that they have um, the stereotype is they feel entitled to a lot of
Mhm,
it.
mhm.
You know, I mean, that's certainly the perception. The reality is, no, it's just the opportunities that were given to previous generations don't exist anymore.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
lot harder to get to where you need to go, and it certainly requires a lot more patience than it might have in the past. And maybe that's where the whole entitlement argument comes from. The fact that that I probably won't be able to afford a house until I'm like in my late 40s to early 50s is not representative of the fact that I feel entitled to own a house. It's just that it can't be done anymore.
Mhm.
Because I can't find, or people can't find the steady permanent employment that's well paying that they would have in the past. And there's all these other things to be said about that too.
Yeah.
But where was I going with that point? Yeah, no, my point is I don't think it's so much that people are feeling entitled. It's just people are a lot more aware of the challenges that they have, and the opportunities that are difficult to come by.
Mhm.
And with the patient argument, it's, you need to work your way around, like you need to navigate the system until you do find that job that you enjoy that pays moderately well. And in some
Mhm.
cases, it might take like 10 jobs before you finally find
Yeah.
the job or the role or the position that you're looking for. Um, and one other thing I'll mention, on this discussion is also, uh, again, that generational difference where 30, 40 years ago, when you finished high school and you found that permanent job, and you bought that house, the culture then was that you would commit and dedicate your life to that company for your whole life and then exit with a pension. Maybe,
Mhm.
you would move up within the company, but generally
Yeah.
you stayed with Stelco for your whole life. That's
Yeah.
just not the reality today.
No.
The culture shift isn't independent. It complements the type of jobs that are available now. And, with precarious employment, you're bound to get people who move around a lot because if you're not going to pay them well, then they're going to keep looking for the next job that pays
Yeah.
slightly more. Um, and that's, when I talked about, um, sorry, I'm not going to go in that direction, but no, but that's exactly what my point is. So with that came the culture shift of, suddenly people are changing careers, what, an average of once every 5 years or so, or, it
Yes.
used to be that you change your career maybe once or twice. Now people are doing it like every 5 years. And I
Yeah.
get that, I get bored of doing the same job for like too long.
Mhm.
Maybe it is a generational thing, but, I need to be doing something exciting. Otherwise I get bored.
Yeah.
Again, that's just me. Other people have other priorities. Some people get um, their some people have families, and to them that's their priority.
Mhm.
That's where their needs come from. That's where
Yeah.
their stimulation comes from. um,
Yeah.
for others it's the job, right? So I don't know. Okay, anyway, it's super high level stuff. Got them all to a bunch of themes.
Talk for
Super
days
interesting
on
for
this.
me. But yeah, no, I'm enjoying this. Did you have any questions, any other questions for me? I'm just looking at the chat. I'm not seeing. I know we have
No.
yeah, we've got a few viewers. Hello out there, people in the real world.
I never even looked to see who's watching, actually.
It doesn't tell me.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, it's great to have a conversation with somebody who, has multiple paths that you're on. It's not like one, this is my job, I'm going to school, this is what I'm going to be doing, because you're probably still not even sure. You know what you're taking, you know what you're studying, you know what you're involved in now, but you don't know. My end goal is I want to be an architect, and that's where I'm going, and that's everything I'm doing is towards that one goal. Everything you're doing is an accumulation of life experience, education, passion, just everything. Like you're kind of living all of these hats at the same time, and already doing, what you want to be doing. So, and then building on it and getting better and moving around. And yeah, it's kind of exciting what you do. I kind of like, I like that. I like the explanation of, the many paths that you're on, and, what you've done to get to where you are now. And you're still growing and changing and moving and shaking.
I think I think you're right about the whole not knowing what you want to do, especially because you finish high school and suddenly you need to know exactly what you want,
Yeah.
what you want to study, and that's just not
Yep.
the case. So maybe my career path and where I'm at with all that experience is because of that, the fact that I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I
Yep.
knew that certain things and that I know that I was passionate about certain topics and certain ideas and volunteer work, but how do you translate that into an actual job? That was always
Yeah. Because
maybe
maybe
I
it's
still
just
don't
a
know, right?
passion, right?
Yeah,
Maybe.
so I think
Yeah.
yeah. So my message for that is it's okay
Yeah.
not to know as long as you are actively exploring
Mm-hmm.
what
Yeah.
you want to do, whether it be through volunteer work,
Mhm.
research, mentoring opportunities, or just constantly just keeping your eyes open or doing networking.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, with people who are concerned about what they're going to study in school, it again it depends on what you end up doing later in life, but generally most employers simply want an undergraduate degree. That's all
Yeah.
they want, right?
Yeah. Just
Um,
keep educating yourself is the
exactly. Or
key,
like a
right?
college diploma, because it does open certain doors,
Mm-hmm.
a lot more doors than if you didn't have the degree,
Yeah.
regardless of what you studied in. So it's okay, and maybe that's why I did political science, because I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I feel like political science is the field in academia where you got everyone that doesn't know what they want to do. Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. But as long as you're still moving forward, that's the main thing. Like you're not sitting waiting for, this idea bubble to pop up and say, okay, that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. So yeah,
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, that's very good.
Yeah. So, I mean, unless there's anything else you wanted to tell me about what you do and, any of the organizations you're involved in, did you want to share?
No, I think we covered a lot of it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll close with just the importance of mentoring and mentorship. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you're someone who mentoring is important in any capacity. So it's always great to seek out opportunities to be mentored, and it's always important to seek out opportunities to mentor others.
Yeah.
I'm proud of the fact that I have a list of several people who I consider to be mentors,
Mm-hmm.
and people who I can go to for guidance on certain topics. But at the same time, there's also people who I mentor
Mm-hmm.
on different topics, and
Yep.
that is so important, not just from the perspective of transferring knowledge and information, but again, going back to that networking piece, you get a different perspective and access to opportunities that you might not otherwise have if you didn't
Mm-hmm.
you know, partake in any mentoring opportunities. So mentoring in any capacity is super important, goes hand in hand with networking and all that. But that's my takeaway is if you're just be open to asking someone. I mean, you don't go up to them and say, "Do you want to be my mentor?" No, you just. I think
Yeah.
I could be formalized that way, and some people do that. But
Yep.
just having access to someone who is willing to answer your question, to serve as a guide, sometimes can be very helpful. And regardless of where you're at in life, right? Um, Perfect example. I mentor other trustees who aren't as familiar with technology. Right? So that's an example. But anyways, yeah, I'll finish off with that. Mentorship is important.
Yeah, that's great advice. I agree. I agree. Well, thank you, Cam, so much for joining us on Let's Talk Careers, and I wish you luck with your education, your online education, I assume, as it continues. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you lots in the community as we run into each other at different places and times. So thank you so much for all your information and for sharing with us your path.
Oh, thanks so much, Catherine. I appreciate
Thank you.
everything you do.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care.